Welcome to the West Parry Sound District Museum's YouTube channel, proudly sponsored by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. Each month we will be exploring a new artifact from our collection. If you like what you see, please subscribe.
To understand the history of logging in the West Parry Sound District, we have to explore back at the progress of European settling in Ontario. The British and French navies began logging the forests of southwestern Ontario in the 1700s to use as ship masts, spars, and hulls. As Europeans began building settlements, new interests and industries began to develop, and there was increasing demand for resources such as lumber. As the lumber supply began to dwindle in southwestern Ontario, the logging industry began to work its way into the north. Mining also had interest in exploring the resources of northern Ontario. Beginning in the 1840s, mining companies sent prospectors and surveyors into the unceded Indigenous lands that bordered Lake Huron and Lake Superior to identify possible deposits. The Anishinaabe of the area had concerns with this, and petitioned the Governor-General requesting compensation for the lands they lost to mining. This prompted the start of treaty negotiations, and in September of 1850, the Robinson-Huron Treaty was signed. The terms of this treaty included reserved lands for the Anishinaabe to continue their traditional way of life, a one-time payment of £2,000, and an annual payment of £600 to each nation. Through this treaty, the British Crown gained access to a significant amount of land along the northern parts of Lake Huron. In 1957, William M. Gibson was given cutting rights for a 50-square-mile tract of land. He then built a mill along the Seguin River and began harvesting pine. By this time, there was an expansion of homesteading in the United States of America, and companies were logging along the lake states to build houses. As their timber supply began to dwindle, American lumber companies looked to this side of Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. They began to place themselves near prominent waterways, the scale of their operations grew, and more sawmills were erected, turning the lumber industry into one of the most profitable for the Canadian export trade next to fur. Logging in the West Parry Sound District would go into high gear after William Beatty and his sons James and William acquired the Gibson's Mill in 1863. The following year, they were granted a license of occupation for 2,000 acres, and in 1872, the Gibson Sawmill would be renamed Parry Sound Lumber Company, and for the next 45 years, would send several thousand logs down the Seguin River each summer. The Beattys began to lay out a town plot that promoted settlement. They began opening stores, building churches, constructing roads, and operating boats on Lake Huron. The town of Parry Sound would continue to grow, and was incorporated in 1887. In the 1800s, the lumber industry was booming. This was largely due to the construction of railroads through Ontario. For areas such as Parry Sound, the development of the Ottawa Armpreneur and Parry Sound Railway in 1896 meant that lumber could be shipped straight to eastern markets without using transshipment points. This led to an increased success of the numerous lumber companies situated along the shores of Georgian Bay. These felled a variety of different trees, including sugar maples, elm, oak, ash, hemlock, yellow birch, and most importantly, white pine. Lumber companies saw white pine as the most sought after due to its popular use within construction, as well as the large size of the trees, which measured over 100 feet tall and over 4 feet in diameter. The logging industry in the West Parry Sound District employed hundreds of local workers who sent copious amount of logs into Georgian Bay from all over the district, giving the area the nickname Sawdust City. More than 20 different companies operated on Georgian Bay over the years, including Parry Sound Lumber Company and Conger Lumber Company, which were both at the mouth of the Seguin River, and Peters Lumber Company that was on Parry Harbor near the location of the Kipling Hotel. The cycle began in October. Workers would head into the forest to fell trees and heap logs into huge piles called skidways. Once they completed their piles, they would need to be moved close to the river. Hauling would sometimes start in January and go into March, but February would be when the bulk of winter's cut would be moved. From March until mid-April, workers would return home to plant crops before starting the river drive, where they would send their logs down the rivers into Georgian Bay to be sorted and delivered to the mills. And in October, the cycle would start again. Within the district lasted roughly 60 years, with most sawmills ceasing their operations within the late 1920s and 1930s due to the dwindling timber resources.